Welcome on behalf of Dallas College and the sustainability team. My name is Faye Davis, and I am joined by my team members, Sonia Ford and Lori Dela Cruz Lewis, who are working in the background. We're also so grateful for the support of our Dallas College WebEx support team, who are also here with us today. So let's get started. Today's session is Sustainability Reporting Common Standards, and I'd like to introduce your speaker, Professor Keith Baker. Professor Keith Baker is the chair of the Curriculum Committee for Mortgage Banking and Financial Services Programs at Dallas College Northlake. And he is a full-time faculty member for both of these programs and Northlake's real estate program. He earned a bachelor's degree in business administration from Arkansas Tech University, a graduate degree from the Bank Administration Institute School for Bank Management at the University of Wisconsin, and a master's degree in financial services from the American College. He also holds a master's of business administration degree from Texas Women's University and is a longtime endorser of sustainability reporting common standards. Thank you so much, Professor Baker, for joining us today. Please begin whenever you are ready.
All right. I want to basically introduce the topic a little bit. A few years ago, I had some friends that we started talking about how, in order to improve our society and our environment and have a positive business environment, we needed to have people focus more on sustainability and having some sort of standards that we commit to from an industry perspective. And so one of the things that a group of us decided to do back in 2015 was to do a study, and it was originally called, the title you see on your screen, Sustainability Standards and Sustainability Reporting, Is the Accounting Profession Ready? And so let's do a bit of a level set. The reason for this is during the decade from 1997 to 2006, ideas about transparency and accountability in the environment, sustainability, performance had not really taken root in the discourse on corporate responsibility, meaning that many companies didn't think it was part of their responsibility to do other than what was in their minds from an ethical and marketing viewpoint with regard to reporting on how well their company was keeping a level set between the balance of what was needed by society, by the environment, and by their long-term ability to keep their business running profitably, which is their responsibility to their shareholders. And then during the decade between 2007 and 2016, voluntary sustainability reporting emerged as part of this trend and is rapidly diffused among large global corporations, and this trend has continued to today. I think it's worthwhile to talk about how this started. And accounting firms and corporate stakeholders have been measuring and reporting social and environmental performance along with financial reporting measures as standard settings bodies have not evolved to fill that void of governmental mandated requirements. What that really means is that a number of years ago, as the CFO of a company called Enhanced Financial Services Group, that was a New York Stock Exchange traded firm. And, we had laws that require us to report our financial statements in a very restricted manner under U.S. GAAP, which are, accounting standards, generally accepted accounting principles that are codified, very structured. And there was nothing like that was mandated by any government entity in the United States, or quite frankly, around the world. And at this point, with regard to sustainability, there seemed to be in place a self-replicating, including multi-stakeholder international network for successive generations of guidelines, which assure their adaptability and long-term survival. And that was something that was started overseas, quite frankly, before it was started here. Funny, it was actually funded oddly by the Prince of Wales in 2004. He came out with a big initiative and funded it with, I have to go back and look, it was either $1 million or £1 million. And what's happened is that when we went down as a group and we began to study this, The evidence that this had really taken hold was that the number of firms represented by the S&P or Standard Poor's, people refer to it as S&P 500 index, issued sustainability reports grew from only 20% in 2011 to just 4 years later, 81%. And the number of firms as of December of 2020, the last time that there was a study done by the Governance and Accountability Institute, 92% of those firms were also issuing some sort of a sustainability report side by side with their annual reports that are required by law. And the sustainability reports are basically voluntary on their part, showing, I think, a very large commitment by the corporate community to buying into sustainability in the long term. And part of that has been caused by, quite frankly, shareholders and others outside the government saying, I'm going to hold you accountable for that. If you don't do this, we may not recommend holding your stock in mutual funds, et cetera, and so on. If you look at the attitudes of people not of my generation, but of the generations that my son and daughter are in, the millennials and Gen Z, they are quite concerned about the environment, and they feel that the firm should be held accountable. And they're looking at that sort of stuff. They look at the mutual funds in their 401k plans and say, do those mutual funds hold companies that I disagree with their environmental stance? And if they do, they may decide to disinvest themselves, or when they're voting on the trustees of those mutual funds, they will vote against people that are saying that we invest in funds of companies that aren't somewhat self-aware of what they need to do to get their acts straight. And the standards boards that were formed separately around the world, and the three most widely accepted are the International Integrated Reporting, which is the IRC, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which is the SASB, and the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, are promoting their sustainability reporting initiatives. And these would match up against the accounting, generally accepted accounting principles, some sort of a common measure of success that I can look at and I can say, well, I understand those standards, so I understand where they are in their progress toward a transparent and me having a good understanding of how they're basically trying to push forward the success and long-term viability of their company, while at the same time protecting their employees and the public from excessive environmental damage. Any rate, so each of these has a certain measure of success, and people that know these standards quite well, some of them have begun to develop preferences. And the Russell 1000 Index, which are companies in the 2020 publication year, and this is companies that are somewhat more technology orientated than the S&P 500. 52% of those were using the GRI initiative standards. 39% were using the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board standards. 17% were aligned with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. 42% of the companies presented alignment with specific UN sustainability development goals. If y'all don't know what those are, you can look them up. There's 17 of them. 35% of reporting companies utilize external assurance for their sustainability disclosure, meaning, I might be a chemical firm and I hire, some of the firms don't have the expertise, so I'll hire a chemical engineering consulting firm to help me develop a report along standards that we think are good and transparent. And 40% of the Russell 1000 responded to the CDP Climate Change Questionnaire. That's a not-for-profit organization that's trying to promote sustainability around the world, and especially in corporate and government entities. So just so we get an idea, I'm going to just run through these very quickly. We'll find that the IRC has strengths and weaknesses compared to the other methodologies. And I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm going to very quickly just scan down them so there are big differences. there's no key performance indicators. Basically, they're trying to adjust to that, but that's their biggest weakness. Um, their flexibility, a big advantage, is to accommodate other frameworks. So you could use them, and if you needed to, say that you were in another marketplace where GRI was a much more accepted standard, you could convert it over to that fairly quickly. U.S. Standards Institute, basically the SASB, was looking that U.S. listed companies will use their output for completing the reports, such as the 10K, which is a required annual report. They're quite extensive. They have audited financial statements in them, and they are producing guidance for the different industries. There's a very number of limited issues per sector. There's a little guidance on standards or KPIs. They're trying to improve that. It's got high levels of comparability that's been targeted, and it works. So if I'm looking at different companies in the same industry who use these same standards, I can compare them very similarly to comparing Toyota to Ford, to Honda, to Kia, to et cetera, and so on, to Mercedes-Benz. I can compare their standards reporting as well. That's an advantage of this particular item. The GRI, which quite frankly is pulling ahead of the other two in terms of utilization by a lot of firms, what they did is they flexed. They created a G4 version, and they have other versions where you can report with a little less stringency and then convert later. So it allows you to transition into doing reporting and not look kind of like you're trying to skim over it. You're basically adopting, and then within a couple of years, you come to a higher standard of compulsory metrics reporting, and you pick those out and you show how you're going to improve into them. Just so you understand that, how did the financial accounting profession play a role in the development of these standing bodies? Well, you go back and you look at the titles of some of these folks. Robert Bunning was the president of the International Federation of Accountants. Tim Flynn at the time was a chairman of KPMG International. Robert Hertz was a chairman of the Financial Accounting Standards Board at the time. Dennis Nally was the chair of PricewaterhouseCoopers International. And Jeremy was the head of BDO. Edward was the head of Grant Thornton. You just see that all the people that were the head of the accounting firms, at the very top, were very supportive of this and pushed for it. And the people that were the founding workers of the IIRC, the original one, were also the same sort of really super senior people. And quite frankly, this was the organization was initially funded by the Prince of Wales. So there was a lot of folks around the world that were very committed to sustainability, and it made a big difference in getting this started. So at any rate, you can see that they were titles, reports that were titled Sustainability Report 48. Some of them have different titles. Reporters use GRI, G4 guidelines, nearly 80% of them do, from just a reporting perspective, so that you can see that it's got a fairly big following. Now, this is back in data from 2016. And when we did our study, we were very aggressive. There were about 5 of us going to try to do a study of the entire S&P 500. We were all going to take different groups. It turned out that 3 of the 5 dropped out because it was so difficult to get people to cooperate, and people thought they had connections in parts of the S&P 500 when they actually tried to reach out and get people to participate. They discovered they could not or would not. And so, but these are the sectors, and these are the ones that are percentage that are actually performing or reporting. You can see some of them are 100%, some of them are fairly high. So we the 2 of us that remained chose the construction material sector and picked a group of companies to look at. And what we did is we did a survey of financial officers, our chief financial officers of selected industries, investment analysts who were known to follow those industries, sustainability activists who were known to follow those industries, and selected regulators who were also over those industries. And that was particularly true in the materials industry because a lot of them have EPA requirements that they're held accountable for. And so we selected a subset of the materials industry to do our work. And when we did those firms, which was about 12 of them, we asked the CFOs and controllers, chief accountants, does your firm issue a formal GRI compliant sustainability report in 2015? This was all done for their report in 15. It was about 50-50. Did your firm not issue a formal GRI compliant? Well, about 40% said they didn't, and 60% no. They said, do you or a member of your staff do a risk assessment or have a named sustainability executive read other competitors' sustainability reports? 90% of them said yes. They're looking at what their competitors are doing. If you issue a GRI compliant S&P, do you or a member of your staff or risk assessment employee or a named sustainability executive compare and contrast your content with your S&P and issue a summary report to a senior management group or your board of directors? Well, the majority of them do. The other thing is when we said, okay, well, other questions is that how do you feel about this in general? One doesn't have a very high importance to you, and 5 is an important tool in profitability planning in addition to fulfilling stakeholder needs. And 3 would be it's a useful exercise, but it's still a work in progress. It's still a mandatory disclosure report. The average ranking was 3.7. So, I mean, it was higher than we expected, to be honest with you. We looked at investment analysts. These are people that decide whether they recommend to their clientele or mutual funds or the people that get paid by. Do you incorporate the analysis of companies' sustainability report in your overall analysis? Well, 70% of them did. Do you incorporate analysis of companies' sustainability report in your overall ability to forecast things? Well, that was not quite a majority, 43%. Does your company actively or routinely invest its time and energies engaging in dialogue with the standard setting groups? Well, very few did, about 40%. So when we ask sustainability activists, these are people that routinely are concerned about the industry. When we ask them, how do you feel about the S&Ps that have been issued in industry? And they said, well, do you read them all? Well, yeah, they read all of them within their industry that are issued. Do you feel a list of industry participants you were sent to be compliant with GRI performance indicators sufficient to satisfy your needs? About 60% said yes, because we were only talking about GRI performance standards. We said, are you currently satisfied with progress toward full integration reporting? Well, most of them were not, because very few firms have them at the time, a sustainability report built into their annual report. That's trending more now in the current times as opposed to 2015-16. So we asked regulatory figures. This would be like somebody at the head of the EPA or somebody that was in charge of some other part of the government that oversaw, companies that, and even some state regulators that oversaw some of the horning plants in one thing or another. It asked, are you aware of the rapid movement by publicly traded firms to issue detailed sustainability reports? Well, the majority of them did. Do you know which standard setting bodies have you interacted with the standard setting bodies? Well, they had 50-50 with IRC and the SASB, very few. GRI, still not the majority. Do you feel that current regulations of disclosure promulgated by the SEC are adequate? Well, 80% of them says yes. So, I mean, the regulators of these industries aren't as excited about sustainability reporting. And says, have you ever had the opportunity to read one? Well, 60% actually had. Then we said, after reading a short description of sustainability reporting, would you support enlarged mandatory disclosures? Most of them don't. After reading a short description of research and a rapid adoption by the industry on a voluntary basis, would you support standardization? on a limited basis, about 50-50. But the killer was the last one. Will you take time to read a company issued S&P that are within your regulatory scope and interest in the future? 95% said yes. I'll come back to this. All right. One of the things that I'm thinking about doing with some friends is repeat the same study with the same participants as possible to see if attitudes have changed. The problem with this is that a lot of these folks are very suspicious of how anonymous the survey is, and somebody's going to find out what they said, and that somehow their response will be outside the bounds of what they're allowed to do without sharing it with everybody. So you have to work around that. I've had some luck working through the Financial Executives Networking Group that I've been a member of for years, and I know some of these people personally. The problem is it's been, 7-8 years since we've done this, and a lot of my contacts are starting to age out. They're retiring. But at any rate, the other thing we thought about doing is broaden the study to industry types to see if there's a differentiation between industries like banking compared to oil and gas. As a simple example, those are also two areas that some of the people that might join us in the research have contacts in. Using a different stock index, this is a Russell index that's more weighted toward growth and technology companies. Selective group of companies that have perceived most likely negative impact on the environment, do a study of their sustainability reporting methodologies. And then maybe dealing with the shift from the Holocene era that lasted the previous 10,000 years to the Anthropocene era, which is, we entered about 50 years ago. And if you don't know what that is, for about 10,000 years, leading up to about 60 years ago, the average temperature in the world only fluctuated about 1.5 degrees centigrade. So we've had a wonderful common, wonderful way for us all to live through the last 10,000 years. But then the last 50 years, we've been seeing that rate of temperature start to fluctuate and fluctuate up fairly dramatically to kind of a frightening degree. So this might be working with Earth Day coming up on April 22nd to encourage students involved in writing to firms that are not currently reporting and ask them to do so as consumers of their products or shareholders, or their parents may hold mutual funds with these companies in their portfolios. And are they aware of the shift and to the Anthropocene era? I'm sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing that right. Some of y'all are scientists, probably know better than I do, and its possible impacts. One of the things that's difficult about this, and I'll go back, is that you start down the path with a study like this, and you start off with 5, 6 people are really excited, and big people begin to fall out when they discover how difficult it is to get people to participate in surveys, and how long it's going to get a paper done. And I presented reports that are titled like the title when we came in. And in 2019, the remaining authors, myself and Dr. Pamela Smith Baker, had a study published by a peer-reviewed journal called User Perception of Sustainability Reporting, and it was done in July. And you think about it, we started down this path in January or so of 2016, and it takes that long to get a publication out anywhere. And the question is that are we moving rapidly enough to make the public aware? And as an educator, I think that we have an obligation to try to tell our students that companies are supposed to do this, and they should. I mean, I've given many presentations where I've asked people at the end, please write companies' officers and tell them how much you appreciate the fact they're doing this, because they came under a lot of pressure during the previous administration to not pursue this. And 176 presidents and CEOs of some of the largest corporations in America took out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal saying, we don't care what you think, we're going to keep doing this. So, we have a group of senior executives and board members that really believe in this, and we need to continue to externally encourage them. And that's that's basically what I made the presentation to get to, is that I believe that I hope that y'all will be incentivized to maybe do that and talk to your students about it. And that would conclude my presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to respond.
Thank you so much, Professor Baker. Yes, we do have a few questions. So, Professor Baker, this is your first question. Do you think ESG sustainability reporting will be more standardized as more ESG-focused finance and venture capital firms become popular with the middle class?
Yeah, I think so. My my son's working for a firm that manages money here in Dallas, and the people he works for, are a different generation than myself. They're probably at most in their early 40s, and they have a mindset that's very orientated towards sustainability. But that's not generally true, because a lot of money is still managed by people that are very super bottom line oriented. I want to only invest in a company that's going to have certain levels of return, and as long as they're not doing anything that's so perceived badly by the public that it would affect my reasons to invest in them. But yes, I think that as we move forward, especially if all of us, especially because most money that's invested in the stock market is invested by professional managers on behalf of like pension funds and 401k plans and 403b plans. But you have the power to tell them what you want them to invest in, because here's the thing. There's several state pension funds around the country that discovered that the firms that were managing their money were insensitive to this. And those folks found themselves fired and replaced by managers who were sensitive to this. So yeah, I think that we'll see it moving more that direction, but the more we as the public can encourage them to do so and reward them, quite frankly, for good behavior.
Thank you. And she also has another follow-up question. How do you think the EV rush is driving or normalizing ESG reporting in big tech and auto industries in particular?
Now, the European Union, um, um, uh, I have a friend of mine and I that did a report and a study 3 or 4 years ago about how the EU was much more rapidly installing renewable resources to tamp down their need to use coal and nuclear power and be too dependent on Russian natural gas supplies. And I think they're much more they started down this path really charging down this path much more rapidly than we did in the U.S. And we become fast followers. But there are a lot more large private companies in Europe than there are in the in the U.S. And we don't know what those private companies are doing. That they're not reporting to anybody. I mean, we have some fairly large companies here that aren't publicly traded. Chick-fil-A, it's just owned by one family in California. So I mean, it's a large company, and they're very popular. You drive by Chick-fil-A, and there's all hours of the day and night. They've got cars waiting in line. So we don't know what their feeling is about the environment, and they could still be asked. And the same problems in the EU that some of the private firms probably aren't under the same pressure that public companies really are.
Thank you. We have a question concerning the Russia and Ukraine situation. So, how is the Russia-Ukraine situation? Does it affect the S&P and all of the other things that you mentioned in your presentation?
Well, their uncertainty breeds losses in the stock market. uncertainty about risk can cause people not be as assured about future growth in business or how a new business venture might do. Because a lot of new businesses people will start, it's a year, 18 months before they come around and see whether it's actually going to work and make money. And when you're in uncertain times, people tend to pull back on those things. And we've had a lot of free capital floating around to put into investments, and that may be negatively impacted. But I mean, depending on how widespread this I would refer to as a misadventure in the Ukraine by Russia goes, and you could see the market go down, more than it already has. I mean, it has gone down in anticipation of this, and we have some other underlying problems that have to do with inflation, and a lot of that's going to impact. Russia does provide a tremendous amount of natural gas to Europe, and despite efforts they've been making over the last 15 years to make themselves less dependent on it, they're still dependent on it, because as they've made themselves put in a whole lot. I mean, you can't go, if you go over Franklin, you get on the Autobahn, there's all kinds of places on the side of the Autobahn that's facing the sun. We've got, solar panels everywhere. I mean, they're trying to replace their need for natural gas to generate electricity, but they still need natural gas because a lot of houses would have to be retrofitted to put in electric heat, and electric heat, quite frankly, is a little bit more expensive than gas, even at the rate we're at. So, yeah, it'll cause a problem. It'll cause a problem with, and of course, it'll cause a problem for Russia as well, because people are already putting sanctions in against them. Somebody said they're going to take them off the SWIFT system. But I don't know how they're going to. Their ordinary businesses that trade, outside their country, that'll really hurt them if they do that. But I don't know if that answers your question or not. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, and it leads to the next question as well. I believe you did. So, given the conflict in Ukraine and subsequent sanctions on Russia, particularly its large reserve of natural gas, do you think ESG talks and reporting will be stalled?
No, because here's the thing. They may not be, well, yeah, they could be stalled in certain instances, because if this were to go escalate, then we would need to produce more natural gas and petroleum in the U.S. And the government might actually relax standards. They may release oil and gas from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. They may let countries that we've been trying to encourage to be more environmentally vigilant, like Venezuela, to be allowed to kind of ease back. So yeah, it could have a negative effect.
Thank you. So the next question is actually one that I had myself as well. So our department here at Dallas College, sustainability, we are starting a series soon about, businesses' road to sustainability. And this question from the audience is, how can small businesses be mindful of how they are reporting on their own sustainability efforts?
Well, if you go to someone that runs a small restaurant in a mall, like a Wingstop or a Wing Zone, or whatever, they if they're new, or even if they're not new, they have to have something called a grease trap in the back. Do they know who's pumping that out and what they're doing with the waste from that? You know what I'm saying? Are they trying to use sustainable and recyclable materials? And if they are, they should promote that, because a lot of them aren't national firms where they can get on television and have somebody say, we've given this money to the city to do this, or this, we've done this to do this to help grow trees. Everybody, everybody that does this is going to have a tree planted. All these different things that big companies that do. What does a small company do? Well, a small company can do things like saying, when they order replacement cups or replacement paper bags, to have a note on there saying that, we're putting our logo in the least amount of ink possible, and this bag is fully recyclable. And, we've started using straws that are recyclable. We've started, you put a sign in the window saying, here's all the things that we're doing. If you're someone that, that sells furniture, you might tell people that you're now using fully recyclable materials, a whole line of furniture. You can seek that out. There's a company that's the entire car. I can't remember the name, but I know the car I drive is a Honda Clarity, which is a plug-in hybrid. But I didn't get a leather interior. I got the interior that's fully recyclable. Everything inside the cabin of the car can be fully recycled except for a few things. And that was important to me. If I'm going to spend the money to buy an electric car, I don't need leather, you know what I'm saying, and other stuff that could not be recycled. And there are people that can do that and brag about it. And you can say, well, my entire little sit-down restaurant, all the fabrics that are used here are recyclable. We use, whatever. There's things you can do. I mean, I wish I had Dr. Allen here, because she's a marketing person. She'd be better at doing this than me. And there's a bunch of other people in the district that are really smart that way. I think you can tell by the way I speak, I'm not a marketing person. But I understand the question, but I'm not sure what they can do unless they're motivated themselves. And just think about their individual business, what they can do to try to make themselves, a steward of the public good while providing a service to people.
Thank you, and you're doing wonderful, Professor Baker. So as a follow-up to that, like you said, I do see consumers of Gen Z and millennials that really do care about sustainable products, and we're choosing not to buy unsustainable products that we feel like will cause further damage. Do you feel like on the investment side, these major investors, are they now pulling their investments from these major companies for not having sustainable practices, or are they passing up on investment opportunities from companies that don't have sustainable practices?
Well, about, I don't know, really a long time ago, probably 50 years ago, a lot of people that were in the money management business began to start mutual funds that didn't have companies that made things that were bad for people, like cigarettes. And then a few years after that, I mean, within a decade of that sort of practice, you started getting funds that were, that were concerned about the environment. They didn't invest in companies that polluted excessively or weren't trying to not pollute. And that's progressed from there. But like I said, there are still large segments that aren't thinking that way. And I hate to say it, but it may be we have to wait for some people to go to the great beyond before that attitude is totally expunged from the system. But there are a lot of mutual fund companies today. I had a friend of mine that retired recently named Victor Ugelin that ran the Enterprise Group of Funds and ran some other mutual funds. He's still on a mutual fund board. He's always telling me how sensitive they are to not investing in companies that are known polluters, or especially known polluters aren't trying to do anything about it. Even when some of those investments would look attractive and meet their filters, because there's, all these firms, invest for filters. I remember when I worked at the Mutual in New York years ago, and I was in the investment department, I was mainly, involved in real estate lending and investments. And, but we had a large department that invested in common stocks. And, I used to talk to Susan Williams, who was a brilliant woman, and she taught me how filters work. That was not my expertise at the time, but I understand a little about it now, but only in companies that I know something about. In other words, I have a background in where it's not just the filter. You need to be able, once you filter, you need to be able to understand the industry. Well, somebody could give me a filter for the chemical industry and I don't know enough about it to make hill of beans out of it. But if it's a community bank, then I know quite a bit about community banks. So yeah, I think that, we're headed that direction, but time needs to pass. And the other thing that needs to happen, part of my focus on my talk today, is to get people to be involved. One of the things, that we don't all participate in elections, and we should, because even if the person we want, it looks like they're not going to win, we should still get out and vote anyway, because you never know when it's going to make a difference. Because even the other side, when they go, well, gosh, I thought I was going to win by 54%, only won by 50.01%. They go, well, I better look at what the other people have voted against me, what they're thinking about. You can't be totally stubborn-headed about stuff. It'll come back to haunt you in the long run.
Thank you. So we have time for a few more questions. So from Lori, how do you feel about extended producer responsibility legislation?
Yeah, I've heard that term, but I'm not sure I'm qualified to speak on it. If there's a specific topic within that, if she wants to get more in detail, because
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, Lori, do you want to explain further, or are you, I see you mentioned IKEA up here uh, and formaldehyde. Is that what you're referring to, Lori?
No, so what I was wondering, Professor Baker, was um, I was wondering how the institution of or the implementation of producer responsibility legislation would affect this how people invest. If more companies said that they would implement a circular economy where they take back the things that they manufacture, I was wondering how that would affect how people invest in companies.
There is a core group of folks that are floating around out in society. You would almost have to do some sort of a survey to find out, by age group and by demographic and uh, 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 there's a number of different factors. Like I said, I'm not a marketing person, but you could find that out and determine if legislation like that would be effective. Um, I I really don't know. I would have to look that up specifically and ask a couple of my friends about it to really have a decent answer. I hate to just jump out there in the middle of it and not have a good answer for you, or not even have a decent answer or observation for that matter. And Laurie probably knows more about it than I do, because I've seen some of the work she's done on sustainability education. That's quite frankly pretty impressive.
Oh, wow. Yes, it certainly is. Thank you so much, Professor Baker. Is it okay if we share your email? So if anyone has any further questions, they can email you directly?
Sure.
Wonderful. Okay, I will go ahead and put that in the chat. So thank you again, Professor Baker. Is there anything you'd like to end with or add as parting words for everyone?
Well, I appreciate that the continued efforts by all of the folks that are in the sustainability area, and I hope that we continue to put educational opportunities out there for both the public and students and the staff and faculty, because I think the more we know, because quite frankly, you can't know everything, and the amount that each person knows about this particular issue is, really varies from person to person. And I can take you back when I was a young man, I grew up on a cattle operation, and my parents didn't have much money, and my dad did it with his brother. And they had this one part of the farm that they actually owned. Most of it was leased. They had a creek running through it, and the city decided to put a sewer treatment plant at the top of that creek. And all they went on and said it won't do anything, you know, you'll be able to drink the water coming out when it's so pure and everything. Well, it killed everything in the creek, all the fish, all the wildlife, and the cattle couldn't be forced across it, or they would basically die before they drink it. And that got bugged me from a very young age, because I was going, how unfair that was, you know, because you know there you can go there today after they cleaned all that mess up, and there's fish back in the creek, and you can get cattle to drink it, even though it's probably not a good idea. But you know, it's just you know, we need to do the things we need to do. We don't need to just say things are okay. You know, oh, it's okay. That water coming out of that sewer treatment plant is so clean you can drink it. Well, you know, you can't get a cow to drink it. They'd rather actually expire from thirst. There's probably something wrong with it, and they don't have to be a scientist to know that. And there's a lot of stuff around. You know, I saw a lot of coal industry. I was with a company. We owned a surety reinsurer, and you know, that was a problem. You know, we don't all the stuff they say we're going to put these mountains we pull the top off of and pull the coal out from under it. We're going to put that back. It'll be fine. Well, I've seen that. We've gone out because we're the surety people to make sure that if the company failed, we would see that it's done. Putting the soil back, putting trees back, replanting the grass. But you can never fix those valleys down below that were just ruined by that tailage that went into them. It's just they're permanently ruined. You can't really fix that. So we need to think about how we do stuff before we do it, because you know some of the stuff can't be easily reversed, and some of it can never be reversed. At any rate, I don't want to sound too negative, but we need to pay attention.
No, agreed. And we've got some people in the audience that also agree with you as well, that type that in the chat. But thank you so much.